Hey, good evening. And I'm back from vacation, so I thought I'd continue doing things with the Labyrinth World book. And I gotta say, most of my vacation was probably reading this book, among other things. So yeah. So one thing I wanted to focus on in this video was just high leveling the different heroic factions that are in the Labyrinth, or as part of the Labyrinth cosmology, right? So, uh, again, this is going to be really high level for all of these different factions. There are other more minor factions that you can read about in the book, as well as each one of these factions probably have a good 5, 6 pages dedicated to them in the book. So, these two little bullet points, give or take, for each faction is not going to really scratch the surface of everything that's in the Labyrinth book, but that's why you should buy the Labyrinth book. So, with that going on, let's go through this, right, and just kind of high level what all these different guys are doing in the Labyrinth. So I want to go with the ones in blue here. They're the goody goody guys, and the ones in red, not so much. So, but as you see, if you'll see that there's some. Well, you'll see, right? So let's start with the first one. So going out from the top left, you have the Concordians. So, or Concord of the Stars. So these guys are as goody goody as you can get, is the best way I describe them, right? So this faction is aligned with the various celestial realms. Uh, so you can imagine, right? If the celestial realm, the main purpose of the labyrinth is to basically fight against the void, right? The void is this major power within the Tales of the Valiant universe. And long story short, uh, they destroy worlds. You want to make sure that you guys are keeping them in check, right? That's the main focus, or generally, of the labyrinth, right? As well as passages and such like that. But if you're playing, some of the adventures in the labyrinth, adventure guide, which I've skimmed it. I can't say I've read that in detail, but yeah, that's where this whole thing is generally going, is growing the labyrinth, protecting it against the void. So these Concordians, they're going to be the goodest of the good, right? Just like you have Celestials that are going to be fighting against hell and the forces of evil, you're going to need a certain percentage of those guys to be making sure that the void doesn't swallow up all the worlds and leave you with nothing. So you can see why this group of people would be fighting against the void. Um, Also, kind of interesting, and this. You've seen this footnote probably before when you've talked about maybe other mega good creatures, like good dragons or something like that, right? Back when things had alignment. Cough, cough. Never should got rid of that. Cough, cough. But at any rate, you know, good is relative, right? You know, you can make a case that, hey, there's a world out there that's probably going to fall to Labyrinth, but maybe letting it fall would somehow protect 3 or 4 other worlds. So for the greater good, you know, maybe you let that world go, right? Or you could do other twists on that. It doesn't have to be quite as um, big in scope as a world being consumed by the void, but you can see where the forces of good might be willing to make a sacrifice for the greater good. So, anyway, that's our first one. So the next one we're going to go down is the Keeper of the Keys. Still going down the left side. So yeah, so the keeper of the keys. So these guys are interesting. So they have their own little town in the labyrinth called the Smithy, and these are your geeks of the labyrinth. And I say that as I am a geek as well, right? Probably a lot of people who play this game are. But regardless, right? So these guys are, basically learning about the labyrinth, scholars of the labyrinth, they call them. If you're going to be scholars of the labyrinth, you certainly don't want to see the labyrinth destroyed. But, you know, fighting the void, sure. But, they're probably more interested in expanding their knowledge of the labyrinth than they are, helping against the void. Not to say that they won't, but they're kind of obsessed with learning everything there is about the labyrinth, which is good for lots of other creatures and factions to know, right? So it's not like they don't do a good thing, but on the other hand, they're just not as dedicated as maybe some of these other groups. Um, the next one is Old Ring. So when I read this section for on the heroic faction section, it just reminded me of the Ents from Lord of the Rings, right? Not to say that the creatures who are part of the Old Ring are Ents themselves, but they follow the same plodding, very patient, you know, uh, you know, faction, or I should say, like Treebeard was in Lord of the Rings, right? And the Entmoot, I think I'm saying that right. So same idea here, where the people who follow in the Old Ring faction, they are shepherds of worlds, just like the Ents were shepherds of trees. Um, they're trying to protect the world tree as well as to grow it and to make sure worlds are connected to it. And they are this section says slow to act, but they also have the biggest potential army of all the heroic factions. So yeah, again, kind of like Lord of the Rings a little bit, right? The ends were pretty nasty. So same idea here. This faction is doing its thing. So they do certainly have, similar to the Concordans, they probably align in a number of different ways, probably a lot of ways. But again, they get there when they get there, right? Uh, the last heroic faction is the Dreamers. So these are the followers of Kartak. I guess I'll go with that as the pronunciation. This is the god of dreams, and their followers are using dreams to, in some cases, move around the labyrinth, bring worlds into existence. If you're reading the book, um, the powers of this god is he's obviously a major player in the labyrinth, which is interesting. Um, but it's also like these guys are very carefree. I think their ability to dream gives them a way of low key scrying around and knowing what's going on in the labyrinth. In fact, the book pretty much says that in one of the paragraphs that they always seem to know what's going on in the void, with the void and so forth. But, they're too maybe happy go lucky or directionless to really do anything about it, or at least to take major action, right? So, yeah, very interesting faction. Definitely a kind of unique twist. I really couldn't come up with a really good parallel for them as I was trying to picture what these guys' goals were. They might not even know what their goals are outside of follow whatever dreams comes from their god and whatever they dream up, maybe as a collective potentially. So that's the end of the good factions, right? So why don't we take a few minutes and go through the bad guy factions, right? The evil factions, what do you want to call them, right? So villainous factions is what they call them in the book. So the first one is the Great Chantry of the Voidmother. So there's a title for you. Um, so basically, this is a group of clerics that are following the uh, dark gods, evil gods, whatever you want to call them. So one thing about their whole, because it's a lot of this that revolves around the world tree, uh, Yggdrasil and so forth. And I mean, this goes back all the way at least to what the Midgard book. This is mentioned about the world tree, and you have the god Nidhogg basically gnawing on the roots of the tree, and he's obviously a major player on the evil side in this universe, right? So this group of the Void Mother um, is basically divided up into two subsects. So you have the scribes of the Black Star, who are writing down the words of Nidrog and letting all know what the bidding of this evil god is. And then you have the Sisterhood of Outer Darkness, which are looking at the other dark gods. So, I mean, all together, you know, these guys are basically up to no good, right? Um, you have a sect that's, I guess, trying to, I guess overall, these clerics are trying to do the bidding of the various evil dark gods and causing bad stuff to happen, right? Is what it comes down to. So, yeah, interesting group. Uh, Bunch of evil clerics doing all evil stuff for evil gods. Check. The next one was probably, at least for me, like really interesting, right? Because I think one of the things that interests me the most in this worldview, I guess you want to call it, is what's going on with hell, what's going on with evil, right? Because I'm not going to say evil has changed if you're comparing, you know, this lore versus the lore of, original D&D. Obviously, it's changed to a certain extent, but like if you look at, um, certainly if you would look at Dungeons and Dragons, I would say going to hell is the place to be for a high level campaign. That or the abyss. That's usually where you are ending up. The amount of lore that's been put out there for the other outer planes or even some of the inner planes is kind of a mixed bag, right? You might have to go back to 3E or something like that to get anything on some of these planes. And certainly in terms of adventures, modules, whatever, um, very little out there compared to, what's going on into the abyss or hell, right? Like, I mean, you have all kinds of adventures going throughout time for both of those, right? Whether it's well, I mean, you know them all. I'm not going to sit here and list them, right? But regardless, right? Now you have a new bad guy in the void. So it's like, okay, so what is the relationship between the void and hell, right? And if you take a look at the Infernals, um, with hell, they're not exactly pro void, right? So sure, they are more than happy to use the power of the void for their own means. But on the flip side, they're not looking necessarily to destroy the labyrinth or anything like that, right? um, they see their gain as power as a step to protecting the labyrinth from the void, right? They want power because they know how to do it, in a sense. So makes sense to me, right? Because I mean, I most campaigns, I mean, they were kind of ambiguous a little bit, but to me, like the main goal of the heavens or the hells is to basically get the souls of the various worlds, people, creatures, right, and have them sorted into a good or a bad place, right? Occasionally a neutral place, depending on which religion you're following in real life. But um, but generally, um, unless you're an atheist or something like that, if you're looking at religions of the world, I guess I shouldn't say that atheism isn't a religion really, but regardless, sidetrack there. But you look at the religions of the world, right? All of them have the idea of separating people into one or the other um, box, right? And that goes back all kinds of different things. So, I mean, to me, that you're not going to get away with, even though I feel like when I was reading about, um, where souls go from inside Labyrinth, and like, some people say it goes there, and some people say it's some higher dimension. Um, would probably stick with having the souls go to heaven or hell. So anyway, this is a long dissertation, but the bottom line is if you're an infernal and you're trying to gather souls for hell and the void destroys everything, you ain't getting those souls because you're not getting anything from the empty set, right? Empty set means you ain't getting squat. So they certainly have a part to play, even though they're evil, in potentially protecting the void. So you could very easily see in a adventure in the labyrinth where maybe the forces of the infernals are helping you, right? And so forth, right? I'm kind of really interested. I really want to know get with the demons. I would really like to see more lore on them in the Cobalt Press universe, right? Because before you have demons would be coming from the abyss and devils would be from hell, right? And now they're flagging worlds that are being destroyed by the void as being the abyss. Yet you have demons hanging out with devils potentially in hell, right? And the books kind of reference that. So, like, if that's true, then what's really the difference between a devil and a demon? Like, why would demons hang out there? Now, obviously, if you're doing an alignment thing, never sure got rid of it. If you're doing an alignment thing like you would in D&D, devils would be lawful evil, demons would be chaotic evil. So you could see why the two wouldn't mix there, right? They're all evil. One is really ordered, and the other one is really, you know, the opposite, not ordered. So they could get together on a whatchamacallit, a similar task of evil. Maybe they would work together. Maybe not, considering that in the D&D world, you have the blood war going on. But, you could see it if you squint. And here, I mean, I guess so. They're all evil, but I would like to understand then, explain to me what's the difference between a devil and a demon? Like, like what? What makes one one? What makes one the other? It was clear when we had alignment what the idea was and how those creatures behave. Now I would like a better explanation at some point in the future. But hey, sorry, got on a soapbox. At any rate, Infernals, evil, but not necessarily doing the Void's bidding. In fact, they will be happy to abuse its power, but you know, they like their souls. Moving down the list, you have the Brothers of the Last Cathedral. So this is an undead faction. that is being led by two brothers who, of course, are also undead, and they want to destroy the goddess Solana. There's not two ends, but I might go with that. And also to destroy all life. What else would undead do? So sure, in a sense, and I would guess, I don't think I read that, but I might have missed it. I would guess that this group would have probably the biggest faction of evil armies for their own purposes because they're undead. So you can get lots of undead. Um, but interestingly, and I guess I could reread it, but I didn't really get the sense when I read this that they were necessarily trying to. Are they really trying to extend the labyrinth? Um, sure, but might not be their primary goal. As long as they're destroying life or they're screwing over this goddess, sure, you know, they're happy. Extending the void might just be a happy side effect, but it's not their primary objective. So again, there's something else to potentially keep in mind, at least in my opinion, reading the document. The last one is the servants of Nidhogg. So this is just a straight up cult. So there's an evil wizard. It's a doomsday cult. They have a lot of doomsday humans. They have other creatures of the void as part of the little shindig. And, they are also going around um, trying to follow the words of the god Nidhogg, right? So there's a wizard Nargoth who is also getting instructions from this this evil god. So it's interesting when I was reading this, I did try to spend some time. I was like, like what's the big difference between the scribes of the Black Star from the Voidmother and this cult? Just that one's a group of clerics and one is, you know, a cult of humans and other void creatures. Seems like their paths could align, right? But I guess not, but I guess most of the time they would. So keep that in mind. I would like to understand a little more fleshed out about that. Maybe I'll reread those couple sections again and try to understand, what's special about the scribes versus the servants. Maybe it is just one's a clerical group and one is, you know, just a bunch of crazy people. Could very well be. But in the end, that is the 8 groups. Again, if you get the book, there's like 5 to 6 pages covering each one of these 8 groups. So there's a lot more here that I'm going to come up with in a roughly 25-minute video. But um, it was still a nice little exercise because, you just kind of instinctively you're like, oh, well, there's good groups and there's evils groups, and the good groups are trying to, save the labyrinth, and the evil groups are trying to destroy it. And that would be a bit of an oversimplification, right? As you see how these different groups behave or what really drives them. So just something to keep in mind. And with that, I think that's it for me, but I want to get something out there since I've been gone for almost 2 weeks. I have a little color though, so I guess that was a good thing. Don't worry, my wife slathers on some very strong sunscreen, so I didn't get burned. Yay, I'm too old to do that kind of stuff. So have a good night. Talk to you soon. Bye.